I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon. This is episode number 141. Today in the show, we are joined by and talking deer hunting tactics with one of the very lucky few deer hunters who has ever made the cover of North American Whitetail magazine. But this gentleman has actually made it 3 times with 3 different 200-inch bucks, and that guy is Sam Collora. All right, welcome to another episode of the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today in the show, we're joined by a very special guest, Sam Collora. And Sam is someone I've wanted to have on the show for quite a while now, for a number of different reasons. You know, first and foremost, he's a well-renowned deer hunter who's killed a lot of really big bucks, including 3 deer that have scored over 200 inches, and all 3 of those deer have been on the cover of North American Whitetail. So that's pretty impressive. But what's also particularly interesting about Sam is that his story, one of his stories, intersects with that of our very own Dan Johnson, my trusty co-host. So some of you guys might remember this story because we have talked about it a little bit in the past, way in the past, about this hunt that Dan had for a giant buck known as Shipwreck. But today we're going to look back on that hunt again and get not only Dan's perspective, but also Sam's now. And then also dig into the stories of some of Sam's other great big buck kills, some of the things he's learned, some of the philosophies and tactics that have led to all the success, and lots and lots more. So Dan, are you ready to talk about Shipwreck again?
Dude, I'll talk about that deer anytime. I tell you, the one takeaway from chasing a big mature buck like that for so many years is that was the buck really that kind of changed the way I hunt, you know?
Yeah.
And it, you know, we can get into a lot of detail about that some other time, and I think we already have in some of the past episodes, but it's a buck that you hunt, you never kill, but he leaves you with something, and he teaches you something, and that was my success.
Yeah.
You know, I considered that a successful journey as far as hunting that particular buck.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just from knowing what I know, it seems like it like you said, it changed you in a lot of ways. It molded you as a deer hunter, and and now here you are today. Unfortunately, he hangs on someone else's wall who we'll talk to here in a few minutes. But that's how it goes. But real quick before we do get Sam on, anything new in the world of Dan Johnson?
You know, just husband, father stuff. You know, that living that cubicle life.
Can I tell you that I was looking at reviews on iTunes. I don't know if you saw this one.
No, I haven't.
But someone left us a 1-star review.
Okay.
And they said, if I wanted fathering advice, I'd go somewhere else.
So
I just laughed so hard.
have I ever tried to give advice on this show?
I don't know if you've ever given advice. It might not have been. It might have just been if I want to hear about parenting or fathering or something like that. I can't remember the exact words, but it gave me a good.
I'm sorry to that person that I ruined your entire day and they weren't able to take away anything else from this podcast except for the very short amount of time that I bitch and complain about my own family.
Can I tell you what, though? I can relate to you a little bit more today than I could have in the past because this past Friday and Saturday, we babysitted my sister-in-law's 4 kids. So there was a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And that was a handful, man. That was a real handful. So
I believe it.
So
you got to give them away at the end of the weekend, right? Like,
true.
They're not yours forever, right?
Not mine forever.
Mine are mine forever.
True. I guess that is an important difference.
Hey, let's not talk about kids, man. I don't want any more 1-star reviews. Okay.
Well, do you have anything non-kid related?
I went on a 7-hour shed hunt on Sunday.
Attaboy. What'd you find?
Well, knocked on a door, picked up a new piece of property, shed hunted it.
To shed hunt or to hunt?
Well, I shed hunted it, but the guy goes, hey, as far as I know, we don't have any people bow hunting on it, so that's kind of a plus for me.
That's awesome.
And but me and my buddy Ryan, we went out there and we walked it, and oh my Lord. When you walk into a piece of property, like when you're scouting this time of year, you're shedding, and you can't, it's hard to look for sheds because you're looking at so many massive rubs that your head just kind of goes up and starts looking at places for tree stands.
It was one of those kinds of spots?
Yeah, one of those kind of spots. So, and it doesn't hurt. How I always talk about, if you can't get the main piece of property, try to get the property next to it that it maybe looks less attractive on a map. That's exactly what I did. And the sign in there, I mean, it's nothing but a little finger that pops out of a little creek system. But the neighbors, it's all managed, and it's, I don't know who the owner is, but you can tell from an aerial map they have food plots and shooting houses and stuff like that. So
that's awesome, man. That is good news.
Yeah. I heard you went out and got a piece of property too, right?
I did. I guess it was last night. I knocked on doors last night. The past week or so, I've been, maybe a little longer than that, I've been driving around in the evenings, checking out fields, trying to see where all these deer are feeding now, and kind of pinpoint a handful that I want to try to get permission on. So last night I knocked on the doors for 3 of them. 2 of the places I had to come back to twice because nobody was there. On one of them, no one was ever there. The second place, they already shed hunt and hunted, so I couldn't get permission there. But the third spot, I did get permission. So I haven't walked it yet, but probably tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to go check it out. And this is a piece that is very close to my main Michigan spots where, Holyfield is or was or hopefully is. So I'm hopeful that this could be one of the spots where his sheds could be. So I'm excited to be able to get permission to check that out. It's mostly big crop fields, but there's been a lot of deer feeding in it, and there's some fingers of timber where there could be some deer bedded or, hanging out in the middle of the night. So there's a chance.
Yeah. 33% for knocking on doors is pretty good.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. Even, shed hunting permission is a lot easier than getting deer hunting permission, right. But in Michigan, it's all a win. Yeah. So
right. Plus your foot's in the door, man.
Yeah.
I'm a bow hunter. Oh yeah. I don't think we have a bow hunter on our property, which, Michigan, who knows? But, for me, I saw some tree stands while I was in this piece, but, they're all on field edges that looked like places for muzzleloader or, other types of stands. So as, when turkey season arrives, I'm going to go back to the same house and go, basically start that process of letting them know who I am and what I'm about, that I'm not a terrible person, and that hopefully that all rolls into me creating a relationship with them to get my foot in, to start bow hunting it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. We gotta end this pretty quick here because Sam's expecting us. But really fast, I'm just curious, in your neck of the woods, Yeah, what have you been hearing from people as far as percentage of antlers that have dropped, or percentage of bucks that have dropped already?
Right. So I had a good conversation with a buddy of mine who's a diehard too, and he says 40% are dropped. But for me, the trail camera pictures that I've seen and that I've gotten from a couple other people, it's less than that. So it's still not what I would, if I could take it all back, go back in time, I would have saved that 7-hour walk for probably this upcoming weekend or the following weekend.
Yeah. I've been hearing similar things here and from my buddies in Iowa. I've heard like 60 to 70% are still holding.
Right.
My camera pictures have kind of dried up, like I mentioned. It's they've moved on to better food sources, so I don't know what's going on here. But what I can say is all the time I spent driving around the past week and a half, I've seen hundreds of deer, and only one of those was a buck, or only one of those was holding antlers. So either, a lot of deer around here have shed, or it's just typical Michigan where there's hundreds of does and one buck in the whole darn area. So, so I don't know about that, but hopefully there's a few antlers on the ground. We'll see. I'm gonna try to walk this weekend, and then the following weekend is the Iowa trip. So
That's right.
Excited about that.
Yeah, buddy.
Well, should we wrap this up and give Sam a call?
Let's get him on the phone.
All right, I'm looking forward to this. So we're going to take a quick break for a word from our partners at Sitka Gear, and then we'll give Sam a call. All right, so today I want to give a big thanks and kudos to our partners at Sitka Gear for doing something that Dan and I have been talking a lot about lately, and that's standing up for public land. And this past week, Sitka Gear sent out an email to their whole email list, which probably includes tens of thousands of people, rallying the Sitka tribe to take action in this fight. And I thought their message was just spot on. So I thought today I could share a little bit of that email with you because I really, really liked what they had to say. So here we go. Sitka tribe. Public lands are at the heart of everything we do as hunters. Public land and wildlife are uniquely American traditions. All of us, regardless of our personal wealth, enjoy the privilege of accessing public land and water that support healthy populations of fish and wildlife. Access to quality public land that supports these opportunities is vital to our livelihood. As hunters, we live and breathe public land and water and understand the importance of these places more than anyone else. This is land that we all own as Americans. It's land that I cherish with my wife and daughters, and land that all of our children and grandchildren should be able to hunt, explore, and enjoy. Unfortunately, as we've all recently seen, there is a very real effort to diminish and sell our public lands. These efforts will compromise family traditions, our ability to put healthy food on our dinner tables, and the lifestyle that defines us. This public land transfer movement seeks to transfer federal public lands to the states under the promise of greater public control. The reality is, the public already owns these lands, and transferring them to the state would only increase the likelihood of future privatization. Too many sections of public lands have already been privatized, resulting in little or no access at all. As hunters, we do not want to give up another acre. Under direct pressure from hunters of all stripes, H.R. 621, which would have sold over 3 million acres of public land, was finally withdrawn by Representative Jason Chavez. This was a positive victory, but there are other efforts that threaten our public lands. Now, the email goes on to explain 3 specific issues. H.R. 622, which is another one proposed by Chavez, which tries to remove the BLM and Forest Service law enforcement functions. Horrible idea. Oregon House Bill 2365, which will empower a task force to research the benefits of transferring federal public lands, and HJ Resolution 44, which will reverse improvements made to the Bureau of Land Management planning process. These are 3 specific issues they mention here, and now I'll continue reading that email. They say, these are only a number of the issues that are a threat to public land access. We can and must take action. We urge you to call your representatives and tell them you oppose H.R. 622 and H.B. 2365 and support keeping public lands in public hands. These are issues that transcend politics and should unite us as sportsmen, women, and children. The diversity of the hunting community is our strength. Politics do not discriminate in the field. We all share in the tradition of public hunting as equals. Additionally, we urge you to join us in supporting the efforts of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and our other conservation partners who are driving the public lands agenda. Become a member and support organizations that are making a difference. United with these conservation champions, we can send a strong message to legislators that the hunting community will not allow the sale of our legacy. Public lands are vital to our lifestyle and the future of hunting. Now that is an awesome message right there. That's the end of the email, and it's one that I'm so proud to see come from one of our great partners at Sitka Gear. And if you'd like to learn more about Sitka, I'd highly encourage you to head over to sitkagear.com. Check it out. And now, let's get back to business and get Sam on the show. All right, with us now on the line is Sam Collora. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, and we've actually talked about you a decent bit over the past couple of years because of your relationship with Dan, but for a long time I wanted to be able to bring you on here and just talk to you ourselves. So that said, though, for those in the audience who aren't familiar with you, can you just give us a little background into who you are, how you got here, kind of your background in hunting and your business related to deer?
Sure. I've been hunting all my life. 30 years ago this spring, I started raising white-tailed deer, and I had them about a year and a half, and we started collecting urine, and we've started a company called Mrs. Dopey's Buck Lure, and we've been collecting urine and selling premier quality lures ever since.
And you're also running a sporting goods store there too, right? Is that accurate still?
Yeah, we've got a little archery shop, little archery and hunting shop that it goes along with that. It's kind of a sideline to the buck lure, but it's a neat little business.
Yeah, I bet. So what about hunting? How'd you get into chasing deer and now chasing some of these world-class deer?
You know, my uncle gave me a set of shed antlers when I was 8 years old. And I've always said that he was the one that started this curse, because I was antler crazy ever since. I love deer. I love antlers. Just everything about them. It's been quite a run.
Yeah, I think me and Dan can relate. A lot of us can relate. When did you started deer hunting at a young age, or did you get serious about it later on, or how'd that happen?
You know, we really, when I was young, we really didn't have any deer in this area. I can remember seeing the first 3 deer I saw. I was probably 12 years old, and a buddy of mine's mom was taking us to a farm pond to go fishing. And we went back to town and told everybody we knew that we saw deer. I mean, that was a really, really big deal back then. As I got older and the deer started to prosper and do well and propagate, we started hunting, and the rest is history, I guess.
What year was that, Sam, when you were, when deer finally started to, I guess, start making a presence in Iowa?
I was probably 8th grade to freshman in high school. So 63, 64, 65, right in there is when we really started seeing deer.
Okay.
And then I'm curious, now that you mentioned that, Dan, now I'm curious, what was like the quality of the deer herd like back then? I mean, right out the gate, when you started seeing a lot of deer, was it all of a sudden in lots of these big mature deer, or did that not start happening until later in the 70s or 80s, or when did we start seeing the Iowa that we know now?
You know, it wasn't that far into it that there were some really nice deer shot and seen. We pretty much have everything here we need as far as, to produce really good deer. And it's just a matter of getting enough deer out there to get some age on them to really, show the size of the deer.
Yeah. What are those things that you're referring to that you think, help Iowa produce the quality deer they do? What are those factors?
Well, I think a big part of it is we don't gun hunt during the rut. I think that's a huge part of it, because that allows some animals to get some age on them. We have a good amount of cover, but we have tremendous agriculture. Mineral content is really good. There's a lot of calcium and just all of the above. Then the genetics are good. I mean, it's just everything we have going here in Iowa for growing big deer it's a win-win.
Yeah. It sure seems like it from everything Dan tells me about the good times he has out there. You guys have got a good situation. So, Sam, there's a lot I want to cover in our conversation here because you've obviously had a lot of interesting experiences hunting and killing deer out there. But one hunt and one story in particular is kind of where I wanted to start because it's this interesting intersection between your hunting past and my buddy Dan's here. And it's kind of a cool opportunity that we have you both here to talk about this story for this deer known as Shipwreck. So I thought we could maybe start there, and maybe Dan, and you guys could tell me how you want to tell this story. Maybe you guys understand the timeline better than I do, but I think the story starts with you, Dan, and maybe do you want to set the stage here and tell us maybe an abbreviated version of your side of the story, and then we can jump over to Sam and hear the parallel side on your end?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been a while now, but we used to hunt in an area where our properties were close to one another. And my first year in this property, I saw a lot of good deer coming out of a portion of this property that was kind of between the two. And one day, a giant whitetail just popped out, and it was Shipwreck, and that's kind of the abbreviated version of a 5-year story that I had with this buck. You know what I mean?
That's all that you're gonna tell us is that this big buck popped out?
Well, I mean,
Come on, Dan.
I mean, it, like I said in the intro, it was my very first encounter with a buck of that caliber, and it changed the way I hunt to this day, being able to experience this buck, learning from his movement, learning how, the times of year he moved, the wind direction, and just, basically observing a specimen like him kind of gave me an education. And, he was, I believe he was probably working both properties for, but probably closer to where I was hunting. And then, later on his life, he probably started moving down to where Sam was hunting. And that's where the intersection kind of takes place.
Yeah. Now, it's been probably 2 years or so since we actually went through the detailed story of like all your encounters with him. Can you walk us through because there's probably a lot of listeners that are new that missed that, episode number 30 or whenever it was that we went through, the timeline a little bit. Can you just give us a little bit better idea, because this was, how many years did this go over the course of? And weren't there encounters for 3 or 4 years or something where you had close calls, or you spent your whole season, focused on him?
Yeah, I think, Sam, what year did you end up harvesting him?
No, it would have been
2011, was it?
12, because it was 5.
Well,
no, it was 11.
11. Okay.
5 years ago last fall.
Okay. Yeah. So I think my very first encounter with him was in 2007. And, he had a very small core area, I feel, as far as I know he would make trips outside of that every once in a while, but for the most part, he lived in a very small core area, and his movement was very limited to a very small portion of the farm that he lived on.
So you saw him in 2007.
Yep. Saw him in 2007. Didn't see him in 2008. Saw him in 2009. I shot him but didn't kill him in 2010, and then Sam harvested him in 2011. 2009, actually, I saw him multiple times.
Gotcha. And it was 2010. Well, when did the obsession begin? Like, when did you start completely focusing on this deer? Was that 2009 or 2010?
It would have been 2009 because I had that's when I started running trail cameras. That's when I started having all the encounters with him. That's when I started losing sleep over this buck.
Okay. So then, Sam, when did Shipwreck enter your life? When did you first see him?
The first time I saw him
Yeah.
was the day I killed him.
Was it really?
You see that? You see that?
That's how it goes.
Let me back up a little bit. Let me back up just a little bit. I have a set of sheds from that deer when he was 7.5 years old. I killed him at 9.5 years old. So we knew he was living there. We knew he was, on the property. I had never seen that deer as an adult deer. At the time, I really didn't run any trail cameras. I just hunt. Anyway, I went in there that night with a doe and estrus drag rag, and did it. I've kind of got a prescribed way that I use it. Anyway, he was the fourth buck to come in that night on that drag rag.
Wow. So what day of the month or year was this? And then can you tell us how you specifically use that drag rag?
Yeah, it was the 18th of October, and it was the first time I had a favorable wind. What I thought was favorable for where I wanted to, and I actually went in there looking for that deer. But it was the first day of the season that I had a favorable wind. Temperatures dropped and it got cool, and it's kind of drizzly and damp and dank, and it was just perfect. And the wind was out of the right direction, and I went in and pulled the drag rag, and here he came.
So when you saw him walking in, did you know who it was right away? It was that buck from the sheds.
I will never ever forget as long as I live. I watched, and Dan, remember how his front, or the end of his main beams tipped up?
Yep.
They hooked clear up. I saw that hook coming from behind a tree, and I thought to myself, well, there's old Shipwreck. I probably ought to kill him.
So
and I will never forget it.
I can imagine. Now, did you know, other than the sheds, did you know that other people like Dan or some of the other hunters around there had been seeing him? Because I remember I think there was a handful of you guys that had been seeing this deer. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a win-win deal. Dan and I are hunting properties, adjacent to each other, and nice and close. And when he shot him in 2010, he came and asked my permission to walk across the property if he could trail him through. And I told him if he had blood going through, to grab his bow and go kill him. Anyway, he came back and told me later that he didn't find him and he didn't go in the property because there was no blood going in, and which I appreciated, because he wasn't in there just pushing mine out. Anyway, this is a win-win deal, because you got two guys hunting a great big deer on properties right beside each other, and we're still friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is sad how often that kind of thing ruins relationships, when people let a big deer get in the way and cloud things like that. It happens way too often, I think.
Yeah, the thing that was really, I didn't quite get it at first when Dan came back and told me he didn't find him. He stood there for the longest time and looked at me, and I went, "Oh, Dan," I said, "if I find him later, I'll give him to you. He's yours. You shot." but he was giving me this look. It's like, I'm what's going on here? And I finally figured out, it's like, yeah, he's yours.
Well,
Anyway.
I was probably in some form of shock, because it was the biggest buck I ever had an encounter with.
Yeah, you were in bad shape, buddy. You were tore up.
So you said that you're going into that spot on that night for Shipwreck. What made that spot so good, and why did you think that'd be a spot you could kill Shipwreck on that day?
We have a little bluff over the river, and it's kind of the funnel of the river bluff for miles either direction. And if you go in there right and hit the ridge line, a lot of times the bucks will come in there and scent check the whole thing. And I work that ridge line, but there's a bedding area that's been there, and like I said, we've hunted this area for 30 years, and there's an area in there that was a bedding area that was really good, thick cedars and brushy, and they would go in and bed there always. Anyway, it got to where it canopied, the trees canopied over it, and it was starting to thin out. And a couple years previous to this, I went in there and hinge cut, probably a quarter of an acre, and where that old bedding area was. And I hinge cut a bunch of trees, and it just got thick and nasty. And I worked around that, across the ridge line and around that bedding area with that drag rag, and got into where my wind was perfect. And that's where he came in, and I killed him.
Wow. When you shot him, yeah, tell me what happened after that. Was it an easy recovery? Was it a tough one? How did all that go? And then I'm kind of curious about how then you told Dan, or how Dan found out how that whole thing went down.
Yeah, the recovery was really easy. I shot him. First thing I do when I get in a tree stand always is to check my equipment and make sure everything's good. And the second thing I do, and I don't care if I've been in the tree 1,000 times or once, I always try to check the area I'm in to look for the worst possible shot. Well, in this case, I had a blowdown that the top of a tree had blown down, and I didn't know it since the last time I was in that stand. Anyway, I was looking for a hole to shoot through, and I found it. Found actually a couple holes, and thought, well, if a deer came through the back side of that, you could probably slide an arrow through there. And sure enough, he came in on the rag, and then he turned and came on the back side of that blowdown. And I can remember thinking he's going to step right into that. And when I was thinking hole, the bow went off, and the arrow went through him, stuck in the ground. And he turned to my left, jumped a little ravine, and then started uphill. I mean, he was pouring the coals to it, and I roared at him. I did a buck grunt roar, really, really loud. And anyway, when I did, I think he thought another buck had stuck him, because he came to a stop like a cutting horse. I mean, he just slid to a stop, and he turned, and he looked right at me, and he tipped over.
Wow. Is that something you've done in the past, to stop a buck when he's running off, and have seen that work more often?
Yeah, I've done it a lot of times. They will, they react well to it.
Wow. That is really interesting. I've never heard that mentioned to do with whitetails. I've seen people do that and heard people do that with elk. You start cow calling after shooting an elk, and lots of times they'll stop, but I never heard about that for whitetails. It's a really interesting idea.
I was with a guy in New Mexico, and I had shot a bull elk with a bow, and it was running towards a ravine. And if it would have dropped in there, we'd have to take a skillet in there and ate it, because you'd have never got it back out. Anyway, he did that. He cow called, and it stopped right at the edge of that drop off, turned around and looked at us and dropped over. When we pulled a pickup up to him and loaded him. Wow.
That's crazy that happened with shipwreck. That's really interesting. So he tips over. What was your? I'm sure you were. I'm gonna rewind here a second. I've got 10,000 questions in my mind I want to ask. I'm first curious. When you saw that buck come in and you're getting ready to shoot him, do you still get some kind of buck fever? Do you still get nervous when a 200-inch buck comes in front of you, or have you seen so many big deer and killed so many big deer, it's just going about your business?
I'm solid as rock, and I don't have any problem at all until I release the arrow. I mean, I'm solid. There's no problem. There's no jitters. There's nothing. But when I release that arrow, I just turn to garbage, and I still get that adrenaline dump that is just it's so unbelievable.
Is that something, Sam, that you've had to learn how to deal with over your course of hunting? Or is that something that, basically comes with, hey, I've been there before, I've been around big deer, you're experienced in that type of scenario? Or is it something that you've always been rock solid from day one?
No, I wouldn't say I've always been that way. I always keep it together, but I used to get more fluttered, before I dropped the arrow. But yeah, I'm good until until I pull the trigger on the release, and then it's just my son and I sat in a blind together this fall. We had 2 deer that were on our hit list, and I killed the first one late muzzleloader. It was the first day of late muzzleloader season. I just could not get together with him with a bow. Anyway, I killed the first one, and a week later, I'm sitting in a blind with my son, and I've got a bow because I haven't filled my bow tag yet, and he's got a gun, and he's not wanting me there because if the big deer comes in, he wants to shoot him, right? So he tells me, this isn't right. You've already shot a deer. And I said, well, if he comes in close enough, if he comes in close enough for a bow, I'm going to shoot him. And anyway, we talked about it, and I was getting sick. I was getting the flu, and I was achy all over, and I didn't want to sit in a tree stand because it was like 20 degrees and a 25-mile-an-hour wind. And so I went in the blind with him, and I said, what are the odds of us seeing that? Neither one of us have gotten this buck within range all season. What are the odds he's going to come in here tonight with both of us here? Well, he did. And he turned and came almost, he was turned coming right square in front of the blind, and I had the bow in the window hooked up, and I was ready to shoot, and he veered off and went away. And anyway, I stepped out of the window and I said, get on him. And anyway, my son ends up shooting this deer. We watch him run into the timber. Well, I went to lay my bow down in the blind, and I turned around and looked at him and said, okay, so you shot this deer. How come I'm shaking? And I was shaking like a leaf. But I guess being in the window and having the bow ready and but I never did it till after he shot. So it was kind of fun.
That's good to know that feeling doesn't go away. That's what it's all about.
No,
right there.
No, it is still exciting.
Yeah. So after you shot Shipwreck, when did Dan find out? How did Dan find out what it was all that about?
Dan at the time was with White Knuckle Productions, and he and Todd were doing their videos together. Anyway, I knew that they had a series of videos. In fact, I'd watched the videos of this big buck, and I knew that they, had an ongoing, relationship with this deer, and Dan was obsessed with him. And anyway, so I called Todd and told him that I had good news and bad news. I said the good news is I said the bad news is Shipwreck got shot tonight, and I said the good news is I did it, and he's dead. I've got him. And anyway, I said, I know you guys need closure for your video, so if you want to bring your cameras tomorrow, you can finish that off. And he called Dan right away, and then Dan called me back right away and told me congratulations. And you know what? I liked Dan before that, and I liked him even better afterwards because he didn't get pouty about it. He didn't have a fit, or you cheated, or you did something wrong. It was genuine congratulations, and he was happy, very, very happy for me. That's a big deal.
That's awesome.
For sure.
What do you remember about that moment, Dan?
Oh, it's hard because when you obsess over something like that for so long, and deer hunting is our passion, and you come across a deer like that's a once in a lifetime. For me, it has been so far. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity at a true 200 incher. And then when that story comes to an end, you're happy that it's, in a way, you're happy that it's over, but at the same time, you're sad because that deer has brought you so much enjoyment, not just from hunting it, but sitting down in front of a computer, looking at maps, trying to figure out your next move, playing basically chess with it.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. I were you gonna say something else?
Yeah, and I think what was it, Sam? That weekend, because I was at work that whole week, so then that weekend or the following week, I came down to the shop. And he let me he let me take a look at it and put my hands on Shipwreck's rack. And it was, to this day, still one of the coolest experiences was just letting me hold those antlers and look at them and touch them because that buck had meant so much to me, even though I wasn't the guy who harvested it. You know what I mean? So that was a win for me.
Yeah, I bet. We talked earlier about the fact that you said you learned a lot from this deer. Did you learn anything, or did you change at all how you obsessed over this deer? We've all done it. We've obsessed over deer, and then in this case, somebody else killed it. Did this change at all how you view your chase for a specific buck? Did it help you, not feel as bad, or I don't know, what changed for you in that regard?
Maybe Sam could talk to this a little bit about how he has approached his tenure as a bow hunter. But I think a lot of it had to do with, me just being too aggressive right off of the bat when the hunting season started.
Yeah, so just from a hunting perspective, that you got too aggressive, and that was a big thing. That makes sense, and I can see how that might be something you would do when you're hunting a 200-inch buck.
Right.
So Sam, what about for you? Was there anything that you learned after this hunt or through this experience, hunting Shipwreck and finding his sheds and everything? Did you come out on the other end having learned anything different?
I don't know that he taught me anything, because, like I said, I only had one encounter with this deer. I didn't even find the sheds. A buddy of mine was here that I bear hunt with from Canada, and he was here turkey hunting, and he found the sheds. So I really only had one encounter with Shipwreck. And don't get me wrong, I have an incredible respect for these animals and their abilities, and they beat us more than we beat them, that's for sure. But I can't really say that Shipwreck taught me anything. I guess the biggest thing I got, of course, killing a great big deer is always incredible, but I think the biggest thing I got out of it was, there's still a lot of really good people out there that are in our hunting, and Dan's one of them. He's a tribute to our sport.
Well, I think that's pretty accurate. Right on. So Sam, what about some other deer? Has there been any other particular deer you can remember over the course of your past hunting seasons that you can look back on and say, that experience taught me something, or that changed how I hunted? Shipwreck was that deer for Dan. Can you remember any kind of experience like that for you?
Yeah, for sure. And it's probably not the deer I've harvested. It's probably more of the ones that have beat me, which is a lot of them. There's deer that I zigged when I should have zagged. I pulled a drag rag in one time, and I made a sharp 90-degree turn, and the deer was falling in, had his nose to the ground. He was dog paddling. I mean, he was on it coming in, and I had turned really sharp, and he went right off of it. And I could not get him in. And I swear to God, it was the biggest deer I've ever hunted. And I didn't get him. He beat me. And I beat myself on that one.
Wow. We don't talk about using drag rags very often. I know you mentioned how you used it in the Shipwreck case, but can you just walk us through high level what the right way in general is to use one of those, and what your specific technique usually, in general entails?
Yeah, the first thing is when I do a drag rag, I always use the doe and estrus, and I think that's something that one of the things from raising deer and living with them, we figured out that if we use doe and estrus before the does in the wild come into heat, just like Shipwreck, I killed him the 18th of October, so we weren't even close to being in our rut, but the bucks are capable of breeding as soon as they come out of velvet. They actually prior to that are impotent. They have to get their testosterone level up, and that's what shuts the blood supply off to the antler and allows them to become, viable and able to breed. So you go out there with doe and estrus early, prior to the rut. And what I do with a drag rag is I will start, first of all, I do tons of preparation for my scent and scent control and boots. The boots don't go to the grocery store or the gas station. They're in a tote. They get, I get dressed at the edge of the timber when I'm going in, and the boots come out of the tote and I put them on. I do cheat a little bit. I wear those boots in my deer lot when I'm doing chores and that type of thing, because I've got lots of deer scent there. The other thing that with the drag rag itself, I'll start out pulling the rag. Basically it's just a string with a cotton rag on it. And I will apply a little bit of scent to that rag on the way in, and I will continue to add to it all the way into the stand. And by doing that, I'm not trying to get somebody to, slosh a gallon of lure out there to sell a whole bunch of it. We start with a few drops, continue to add a few drops all the way in. And what we're doing is showing which direction that deer is traveling. So the scent gets stronger all the way into your stand location. Okay. As you make your final approach to your stand, it doesn't matter if you come in with the wind or side wind or how you do it, but your final approach to the stand needs to be with the wind to your back, walking into the stand. And in doing that, when you're sitting in the tree, you're not up there blowing back to the deer. The deer scent would be blowing to you. Final approach to the stand, I always try to make a little bit of a hook, and not real sharp, but just a gentle little hook. So, and then put the rag like in a little sapling or something. And I want him to turn and get his attention away from me, not look. I don't want him to come in and park, stick his nose on the rag and look at me in the stand. I want him to come around and to be quartered away and paying attention to that rag the other direction. And I have done this so many times. I mean, just over and over and over, and had deer do exactly what they're supposed to do.
You mentioned that you're usually going to start using this type of tactic in the pre-rut. How far past that will you continue doing it? Do you do it all the way through November, or when do you stop using a drag like that?
I'll use it all season, all the way through. And if you think about it, you got pre-rut, you got bucks out looking for does, and they're traveling and they're looking. And I use it the 1st of October when we open here. Bucks are capable breeding like the 1st of September. So the 1st of October, when you're out there doing that, they're not going to come in like they do November 1. They're not going to come in crazy, but a lot of times they'll walk in and do exactly what you want them to do without going blowing through. If you're hunting the rut when everything's, ramming, jamming, and everybody's, going 100 mile an hour, it's much harder to kill a deer. If you got him walking in and going over and sticking his nose on a drag rag, it's a heck of a lot easier to put a hole in him.
Very true. Well, that being the case, what's your favorite week of the year to be out hunting whitetails?
Last week in October.
And why?
I don't have any competition. The does aren't out there stealing them from me. The bucks are all ranging. And I'm saying the last week in October to the first week in November. The bucks are all ranging. They're all out there looking for a girlfriend. And it's so much easier to get them to do what you want them to do than it is if I did a seminar down in Atlanta one time, and I had this guy in the back, and we got to the question and answer thing, and anyway, the guy raises his hand, and his question was, when the bucks are controlling the rut, what happens? And I stopped him right there. And I said, bucks are not controlling anything. I said, hang on a minute. I said, how many married men we get in here? And then, 75% of the guys raised their hand. I said, how many of you folks how many of you guys control the rut at your house?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. So if you don't have any competition from the ladies, you can be the only game in town, and it works. I mean, it's just unbelievable how it works.
Yeah. And
when the girls start stealing them, I relate it to hunting turkeys. When you're out there on that green field and there's a gobbler out there with 6 hens, it's real tough to call him over to the edge of the brush and kill him. He's not going to leave her or them. And it's the same thing with a buck. If he's with a hot doe, real tough to get him to come see you.
Yeah. What other, speaking of drag rags and stuff, what other scents do you use and what other applications other than the drag rag approach? Or is that the only way you're using your scents?
No, I think Dan may have used some of them. We've got it's fairly new. We call it a landmine. And we have a bottle of lure that you actually bury the entire bottle in the ground. And once you got it buried, then there's a ring on the bottle. You pull the ring, and there's a wick inside the bottle, and you pull that wick up out of the ground, and it permeates the scent, and you do it in a scrape area, and it is unbelievable the action we get on those things.
Wow, you're using that for the camera locations?
I used one this year, and I didn't take your advice, Sam, and pack it down hard enough, and they'll dig it out of the ground with their hooves.
Yep, they'll steal it. We've had a whole bunch of guys that had the last picture they got of their landmine. The deer had the wick in his mouth, walking away with the bottle. So what we started doing is boring a hole in the ground with a cordless drill, and then we press that bottle down into that hole. And that keeps them from digging it out or pulling it out with their mouth.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, that sounds like a good type of situation for great trail camera pictures. I've used a lot of mock scrapes and things like that with my camera for photos, but I've never really settled on a particular scent or lure that I've been able to use that has worked for me best. I've still kind of just stuck with natural Mark Kenyon human urine, and I've been meaning to try some different things, so maybe I'll need to try something like that.
Both of the bucks that my son and I killed this year we had a lot of trail pictures of them over the landmines.
Do you use other things during the rut or pre-rut time period that we've been talking about, like aggressive calling techniques or anything?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love to rattle. It's what a thrill when they come in to set of horns being smashed and I rattle, I grunt, I do everything that a deer does. The other thing that I can tell you is I've lived with deer for 30 years, and I've spent my lifetime studying and trying to understand what they're doing, when they're doing it. Body language is huge. Knowing by their action what they're going to do next. And they're not always knowing, but having a real good idea what's going to happen with them next, and being able to call them into your stand location, it just all of those things together have really helped me to harvest bigger deer.
Yeah, I imagine. Can you give us some examples of some of that body language that you look for and how you react to what you see them doing?
Yeah, I've done seminars all over the United States with about whitetail body language, and it still fascinates me. There's a couple instances I can tell you that and one was with a real well-known celebrity, and he's standing on the front porch of my shop. We've got deer right there by the shop, and this deer started walking up the hill, and I looked at him and I said, "That deer's going to lay down." And he goes, "How do you know?" And I said, "I don't know, but watch him." He says, "Well, what makes you think that?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "Just watch him." And he walked up 3/4 of the way up the hill, he stopped, walked in a circle, made another half circle, and laid down. Anyway, the guy was standing there. He goes, I don't believe it. Anyway, he goes, I need to spend more time here.
Wow.
They telegraph. I don't if Iowa's a huge wrestling state. Every kid in Iowa's wrestled sometime or another. And one of the things that your coaches always teach is your opponent will telegraph. And he will tell you if you watch close and you understand it, he will tell you when he's going to move, and there'll be just something there. There's a look, there's a nod, there's a dip, there's something there, and before he moves, he'll telegraph that move to you, and you know it's coming, and you can react. Okay, deer do the same thing. They telegraph through their eyes, their ears, their hair. I mean, when that hair, we've all seen their hair stand on end when there's two of them bristled up looking at each other. Tarsal glands will actually flower and open up when they're nervous or if they're upset. Either one. If they're scared, nervous, upset, mad, that tarsal gland will open up and flower. And you know what it looks like on a dead deer where it's laid down and it's almost like it's combed and groomed. Mm-hmm. It'll honestly clear up. The preorbital gland on the deer's below the deer's eye will flower. It'll open up if they're scared or nervous. Those things tell you that this deer's probably going to jump the string on me if I shoot, because he's already on high alert. If the deer's standing there and his ears are about halfway down, sitting there, and I call him being in neutral. He's just standing there completely neutral, nothing going on, do, and just zip an arrow right through it. If you see his tail half mast and kind of quivering, he's probably urinating. What a great time to shoot. He's not thinking about nothing else. Buddy and I were on our way home from a moose hunt up in Saskatchewan, and this deer was stopped, and he was hunched. And it was a buck, and his back end was lowered. And anyway, we're driving along down the highway, and he goes, "Hey, look, that deer's taking a poop." And I said, "No, Smitty, it's not." I said, "A deer will poop on the move, on the fly, and he doesn't have to stop and concentrate on it." I said, he's taking a leak." And he goes, "Well, I guess you'd know." So yeah, it's just there's just a million things they can tell you by their posture and hair and all the things they do.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, what about barometric pressure and moon phases? And a lot of these hunters out there, they get caught up in trying to predict deer movement based off of those two and including weather. Can any of those be connected, or is it just kind of hogwash?
No, I think there's a lot of merit to all of it. I don't understand it well enough to tell you that this is how to do it, but I guarantee it has merit. Here again, I kind of cheat. I look out the window, and if my deer are all up on their feet, I know it's a good time to be there.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good barometer. I have guys call me at the shop, and they go, "What are your deer doing?" I said, "Oh, they're all bedded down." Okay, I'm going to wait a couple hours. But it really is the same. If my deer, if all of my deer in my pasture, if every one of them's bedded, I guarantee it's the same thing in the wild. It just, and I should probably pay more attention to barometric pressure and moon phase and see what that has to do with what I'm seeing.
Are there any other things that you've learned from watching the deer that you've raised that you've been able to apply in your actual hunting?
All the above. Everything that we've talked about. Just when you know that a deer's when he locks up and he's standing still, or he'll and here again he'll telegraph that he's going to move. It gives you a great idea when to draw the bow, when not to draw the bow. It's all every little detail he gives you can help you some way or the other kill the deer. And even calling, if you got him in that last few steps and you can watch him know what his demeanor is, it can help you either know when to dummy up or when to be aggressive and do some calling.
Yeah. Speaking of calling, can you dive in a little bit deeper into your specifics of, what types of calls and grunt or rattling sequences you use, when you use them, what in particular you actually do?
I don't know if you heard that or not. I got a bull elk that just bugled.
That's awesome.
I'm sitting outside my home. He's entertaining my neighbors.
Wow.
As far as calling, I don't know. I do a lot of different calls, and a lot of times I just mimic what I hear my does do with their babies and around the bucks, as well as grunting. And like I told you earlier with shipwreck, I made a very, very aggressive, growling loud, basically the roar, and I've only heard that a couple times in the wild, but it sure locked him up.
Yeah, that's incredible. Moving back in time a little bit, you killed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you killed your first 200-inch deer in 1996. Is that right?
That's correct.
Could you tell us the story of that hunt and that deer?
That deer was, I had passed a deer 100 yards from where I killed him the year before. That was a great, big, lanky 10-pointer, looked like a 3-year-old. And I don't know that it was the same deer, but I always would like to think that it was. But I went out the 11th of October, and there again pulled a drag rag out into the sand location, and had some does that I busted on the way in, and I was hoping that didn't screw anything up, and had squirrels playing in front of me, and across the CRP field, this deer came in from, and he didn't come down the drag rag trail, but he came from downwind of the drag rag and walked right to it. So he'd come all the way across the CRP field with his nose in the air, walked right to that drag rag and stopped. I tried to get a shot on him, and I drew the bow, and here again I was solid as rock when I did it. I kept thinking, boy, that's a really good buck. I need to kill him. Well, I drew the bow and couldn't get through the brush, couldn't get the shot, and I let it down. And when I let the bow down, it was just, I don't know, it must have simulated taking the shot, because I turned to junk. My knees started shaking, and I was, started to chatter, and I can remember telling myself, this is a really good buck. Don't screw this up. And I talked myself out of it. It's like, get your act together, straighten up. When he comes by you, you got to be ready. You got to be able to kill him. And I did. I got squared away. I got my nerves under control. And I don't know, 3-4 minutes later, he turned and came from right to left and walked by me at about 30 yards, and I slipped an arrow in him.
Wow. What was
and then
that?
I turned to garbage.
What was that stand setup like? What made that the right spot to be?
Kind of, well, it didn't end up quite like I thought it was, but it was, I was set up to catch him coming out of bedding to feeding, and trying to have him catch my drag rag on the way. And he actually came from the opposite direction.
What about your?
They don't always play. Excuse me. They don't always play the game the way we think they should.
Yeah. Got to take advantage of whatever they give you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dan, what were you about? Or what are you thinking over there?
You've been, not only do you raise deer, and you've been, raising them for 30 years, but you've been a a hunter for almost, pretty much your entire life, translating that to what the average guy does, what are some of the biggest mistakes you feel hunters make in a year when either going after, a group of deer or going after a specific mature buck?
I think scent control is huge. Most people don't. I have guys that wear scent lock suits that don't wear a hood. Well, don't bother, because your ears, your hair, your breath, if you're not containing it with carbon, don't bother wearing the suit. It doesn't matter. Using the wind, I think, is probably, and I do all the scent preparation. I do everything with scent lock and try to use it correctly. With that, I still use the wind every time I hunt. And, I talk to guys, it's like, well, we got 12 stands and there's 12 of us, so we all go to one of the stands every day. If the wind isn't right, don't hunt it. Take the day off, whatever it takes, but don't go in and screw it up. Deer pattern us way, way better than we pattern them. If you go in and the mosquitoes are biting you and you're swatting mosquitoes and sweating and doing all those things, just, don't go fishing. Don't pressure them. Deer react to pressure more than I think anybody realizes. I try to scout from 3/4 of a mile away. I don't want to go in and bust them. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things that I used to do that I don't do the same anymore.
What are some of those other things? What are some of the other things that how you've evolved?
Well, just like I said, if the wind isn't right, don't go there. Save the location. The first time in a stand is always the very best. And I have over the years used a climber a lot, and I'll go out and just have spots where I can go and not necessarily, anything set up there. But if the wind's right and I've been seeing some action and things are working, sometimes if you just move, 30 yards from where you were and go up in the stand, sometimes that's all it takes to throw them off and put you in the right place.
Yeah, it's the little things, right? That's one of the biggest things I think Dan and I have learned over the years is like just the importance of every tiny little thing you can move in your favor. Those things add up, right?
Oh, absolutely, and that's something that I've always tried to tell my customers, and even when I work on their bows, I tell them that the little details kill big deer. Having everything set where it's where your peep sight isn't going to move or it can't come loose, or those, like I say, little details kill big deer.
Yeah. Are there any other things that you do different than most other hunters? Is there anything else really unique that you apply when it comes to deer hunting that you think is a little bit different than the average guy or girl?
Probably the biggest thing I do different than 90% of the people is I have set my life up around deer and deer hunting, and I will probably spend 40 to 50 times what the average hunter does sitting in a tree stand.
A lot of quality time in a tree, huh?
Yeah, I had a young man come to my shop one day and told me he was really, really upset because he almost fell asleep in a tree stand. And I said, "How old are you?" And he was 19 years old. And I said, "Hell, I've had that many years of sleep in a tree stand." I said, "I've slept in a tree stand longer than you've been alive." But no, you got to spend the time. It doesn't just happen. You got to be there. But on the other hand, if it's not right and the wind isn't right and the conditions aren't favorable, don't go in and booger it up. When I tell you how much time I've spent in the stand, it's you also got to understand that there's a whole bunch of different stands and a whole bunch of different places where I'm going, and I'm not going in and boogering one up all the time.
Yeah. Is there anything else you do other than careful scent control and just not going in to hunt too often to reduce the pressure you're putting on your deer? Is there anything else about your strategy or your access routes or anything else that you focus on to make sure you keep that pressure low?
Yeah, I very much try to slide in and slide out. I've got some buddies that have hunted with me for years that I finally got them convinced that they needed, when they come here to hunt with me, they needed to see every inch of that timber. It's like, guys, you don't need to do that. All you want to do is slide into that stand. It's already there. Slide in, slide out, go around the areas where there's going to be deer. If you got a field where they're feeding, go around it, and slide into the stand. Don't booger it. Just keep the pressure to an absolute minimum. We try, in the off season, not to booger things up, and give the deer a lot of pressure. Try to give them plenty of feed and cover. And just like I said earlier about, hinge cutting that bedding area. I've done a lot of that. I've cut trails from bedding area to bedding area. So I've got good travel corridors, and with every bit of that, every time I'm doing that, I'm figuring out where I'm going to have a stand location that I can slide in and slide out without being caught.
Speaking of the hinge cutting, are you doing any other habitat work? Do you plant food plots or any other bedding improvements or anything like that?
Yeah, all the above.
Yeah. What have you found to be some of the most successful improvements you've made? I'm interested in like a specific food plot, how you planted it, or like a specific instance of a bedding cover improvement. Any unique example you could share with us that was really effective?
Yeah, with food plots, I found that if we got farmers that farm our ground, and that's what they do for a living, they're really, really good at it. We all want to do little food plots here and there, and a lot of them never make it to maturity because, you're going in and putting a variety of something in there that the deer really like, and they hammer it, and it's gone before the season ever gets there, or it never makes maturity. What I like to do with food plots is I will have the farmer, whatever he's planting in my field, I'll have him plant the same thing, same variety in my food plot. And for the whole season, they've got, let's say there's, I've got a 2-acre food plot, and there's 60 acres that the farmer's got. Well, I want it to be the same thing. So when the deer are in there, they've got 62 acres of beans. Well, when the farmer takes his out, I still have beans because they didn't go in and just devour mine because it was the only beans there. So I feel like that's really important. You have food when you're done, and when he takes his out, then you're the only game in town.
True. That's a nice position to be in too. When like you said, when you're the only game in town, you all of a sudden can pull in a whole lot more deer and really focus that deer travel, I imagine too. With that being the case, do you specifically plan some of your hunts or some of your hunting strategy around when the crops are going to come out? Like, do you stay out of certain areas because you know that this spot's going to be a lot better once the rest of the crops come out?
I don't know that I necessarily stay out of them, but you can sure see the difference if you got standing corn, and say you got 300 acres of standing corn all the way around you, whether it's yours or the neighbors. It's real hard to find deer when they can walk out in the middle of that cornfield and disappear. So, yeah, groceries have a lot to do with my hunting strategy. I mean, you got to know where they're going to feed, where they're going to bed, and what groceries are there and what they're looking for. Early in the fall, they're probably not going to be on the cereal crops. They're going to be out on green, and we always plant clover and we've got a variety of things, and knowing when to hunt them is probably very crucial.
So what's the timeline look like then? Sounds like you focus on green early, clover early, and then how does that shift throughout the rest of the season?
Once it frosts and if it gets snow covered, unless the clover is really tall, they're probably not going to hit it that hard. And when it gets cold, then they go to the corn and beans. I know there's a ton of different food plots and providers out there that they all have a their particular thing, and the brassicas and all of that. And the other thing is you can sit back and scout it and kind of watch and know what they're doing when.
Yeah. Speaking of scouting, and it sounds like you do a lot of long distance scouting. I think you mentioned earlier that you don't run a lot of trail cameras. Why is that?
Yeah, because I'm old. You know what? My son is getting me, I guess in the 21st century, and he's got me kind of excited about these trail cameras, and we had more fun with them this year than I have ever had in the past. I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. It's really neat to see all the deer. I've watched so many guys booger an area up because they put a camera right in the middle of where they're going to hunt, and then they go in there 3 times a week to look at their pull their cards and look at their deer, and by the time season gets there, they've had so much pressure they leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one little guy that I know he did that. He couldn't understand where the deer went, but he came in twice a week to show me his pictures. so it's like, I don't know. That part of it I don't like. But as conservative as I am about going in and busting them and bothering them, trail cameras are really neat. But there's something about the spontaneity of like, oh, look at that buck. I've never seen where he come from. This is great, as opposed to, oh yeah, there's Wilbur. Here he comes again.
That's true. We recently have been just talking about that, how there's something cool about seeing a unique buck or specific buck over and over, but then there's also something cool about that surprise and the mystery of a new deer showing up, and you kind of get some with one and you lose some with the other. But I guess it's all pretty cool in one way or another.
Absolutely.
Hey, Sam, it's getting to that time of year where deer are in the process of shedding their antlers. Is there, again, observing your deer herd, is there a time that a majority of your deer shed, or do certain deer shed at the same exact time every year?
Yes. Kind of all the above. I know certain deer will shed pretty much the same time, but there again, the amount of stress the animal has during the winter makes a big difference too for a lot of the deer. This year they seem to be holding on to the antlers longer because we just had such a mild winter that they haven't had the stress, and what really happens is the testosterone level in that animal drops, and that's just like when they come out of velvet, it's the same thing for dropping the antlers. So when they come out, when they drop the antler, they're impotent, their testosterone level is way low, and that's what causes that antler to separate and fall off.
What percentage of the bucks are still holding by you?
Reports from the guys around, they're seeing bachelor groups and maybe 20% still have antlers. I had one the other day, just a couple days ago, said that probably might have been 75% of the deer in that particular group had antlers. My antlered bucks that I have, just in one lot together, there's 9 bucks, and 2 of them are still carrying, and they're both little bitty guys. So they haven't any stress this winter.
Yeah. It's interesting how it seems to vary so much across region to region, and even local areas too. It seems like in some parts of the country, I'm hearing people. Me and Dan were just talking a little while ago about a lot of bucks still holding, and then you hear about these other instances where lots of them have already dropped or dropping right now, and it's one of those mysteries that is pretty interesting how it all kind of works.
Yeah, but it is pretty much related to stress levels. If we'd have had a tougher winter, I'm sure that we'd have more deer, and they ought to be about done by now dropping.
Yeah. So Sam, looking back over the course of your years of hunting, we've talked about the fact that you've killed 3 200-inch bucks. I'm sure you've killed a lot of other great deer. Is there any one, whether it be one of the ones we've already talked about or any other, is there any deer that you've hunted and killed that you can kind of pick out as the most meaningful or the most memorable? And could you tell us why that is?
I can probably tell you more about the ones that have beat me for being in my memory and burned in. I've got nice deer that I've killed that, it was a great memory. It was a great hunt, but probably the most memorable deer that I've encountered are the ones that have kicked my butt.
Yeah, tell us about
that. I'll never forget them. The one I told you, I pulled the drag rag and had him coming in. I mean, he was like coming in like a song. And I made a 90-degree corner, and he went out across the CRP field. He missed the trail, and I will never forget that deer as long as I live. I had another one that was, I needed 2 steps, and this buck was if he was an inch, he was a mid 180s, and it was a huge 10-pointer. He was gorgeous, and I needed 2 more steps, and he stood downwind of me, and like I told you, I do a lot of things for my scent control, but he was downwind of me for 35 minutes. And he froze up and would not come in. And all of a sudden, must have got just the right amount of wind, stuck his nose in the air, and I saw 2 little, sniff, and he got rigid, and he just kind of melted away backwards. I rattled that deer in. I watched him come in for an hour and a half, and I'll never forget. I went back to the truck. I took my hunting clothes off, put them in my tote, put my boots in the tote, slammed them in the back of the truck, and I was so upset. And I got in the truck to drive away, and now this is really stupid. And I sat there for a minute. I looked up, and I went, "Thank you, Lord. That was a great experience. I'll be back to get him tomorrow." And I never saw him again. Gorgeous deer.
Wow.
Now, you've had one hell of a hunting career, right? I mean, you've had encounters with and have killed deer that a majority of the listeners will never see in their entire life. And knowing you, I would say, and then this is just an assumption, that if you never shot another deer again, you would be happy. How much attention now is on your children and grandchildren?
Oh, your kids and your grandkids are the best part of your life. Don't get. You're wrong about that one thing. Is I want deer and big ones. I have my oldest grandson is an absolute killing machine. This kid is, first of all, he is so smart. He's way smarter than his grandpa, but he is a sponge. Anything you tell that kid, he digests it. He goes through it and he understands it, and he is one of the greatest hunters I've ever met. The kid is just incredible, and he absolutely has ice water in his veins. He is a killing machine. Just really, and eyesight of an eagle. I mean, it's just, he really is an amazing hunter, and it's really fun to watch that. And all the kids aren't going to hunt. Some of them don't have that interest. Some do, but he's got it, and he's got the killer instinct for sure. Hunting with my son is I burned him out at a very young age. When he was 12, it was cold and miserable and nasty, and he wanted to go home. And I'm telling him, we're deer hunters, we don't go home. Well, he went home that night and he says, I'll never hunt with you again. And he he did that for a lot of years. And here in the last half a dozen years, we've been hunting together. And this kid, we got Sammy and whitetail deer the same spring. So he'll be 30 years old this spring. He grew up with deer, taking care of them, and he understands them. It's really a pleasure to watch him hunt because he knows it, he understands it, he can feel it. You can watch him, and it's just I really get pleasure watching him enjoy one of the things that I enjoy most in my life. It is a big deal. You're right.
Yeah, that must be pretty awesome. So I've got one final question for you, Sam. Given what you do for a living and where you live and kind of what you've been involved in, I got to imagine you've met a lot of really, really good hunters. And I'm curious if there is any common trait or quality that you've seen in these very best of the best hunters that you've gotten to know. What would that common trait be?
I had a guy, actually one of the better hunters I've ever met. He told me once, and it was a true compliment from him. But he asked me, he looked me right in the eye and he asked me, he says, "Do you know what's different between you and I and a lot of other hunters?" And I says, "Well, I'm shorter than most of them." He says, no, not that. He says the difference, and I don't want to brag on myself in this way, but the difference in him, let's say, that anyway, we're sitting there talking about it, and he says, "Do you know what the difference is?" And I said, "Denny, I got no idea." He goes, "We finished the deal." He says, "Lots and lots of folks are going to have opportunities." He says, "You have to finish." And I think that's probably true. There's lots of opportunity out there, but if you don't follow completely through, and that's one thing I was telling you about my grandson, he finishes. I mean, every time he's clear through the whole thing. So yeah, you can do all your homework and do everything you need to do, but you got to finish.
How do you become a better finisher?
I think that's experience. I think that's, spending the time and being there and knowing it and understanding it and knowing what might happen next, or just by a twitch of a tail. All of the things, just I think you have to love it. Yeah. You have to be part of it and eat it and breathe it. Just like we are, all of us, we eat it, breathe it, sleep it. Or as Dan said, he was obsessed by it. That's all part of it.
Yeah, very true. Very true. The good news when it comes to that, Dan, is that you and me, we've got hopefully plenty of time to get better, right?
That's right. Amen.
So, Dan, do you have any final question or thought for Sam?
No, just I tell you what. Every time I come into the shop, because I'm from Mount Pleasant, and I went to high school with one of his daughters. And every time I go into the shop, this is a plug for Sam and his business, but one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. And on top of that, he knows what he's talking about for whitetail. So if you get the opportunity to, meet Sam Collora and shake his hand, I say do it.
Well, hopefully I'll be down there. Hopefully I'll be down there soon to do just that. Seems like you are absolutely right. So Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and sharing all this insight with us.
You bet. This has been fun.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. And good luck this year. Hopefully you can kill another giant.
I'll be trying.
Thanks, Sam. And there you go. Episode number 141 is a wrap. Real quickly, though, I do want to thank our partners who have made this podcast possible. So big thanks to Sitka Gear, Yeti Coolers, Ozonics, Redneck Blinds, Maven Optics, Whitetail Institute of North America, Carbon Express, and Huntera Maps. And finally, thank you all for listening. And I've actually got to meet a number of you at some recent events, and I gotta tell you, the Wired Hunt audience, you guys are pretty legit. So thank you. Good luck out there scouting and shed hunting, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.